You know when you look at a weld, that shimmering line that holds two pieces of steel together? You probably just see a seam. Well, we're about to completely change how you see it. Because hidden inside that seam is a whole microscopic world, as complex and busy as a city. And it's that hidden world that decides if a skyscraper stands tall or if it all comes crashing down.
So what's the big secret? What's the difference between a weld that holds and one that breaks? Well, the answer isn't something you can see with your own eyes. No, you have to go deep inside, to a scale thousands of times smaller than one of your hairs. The real story is all about crystals, heat, and pressure. So you ready? Let's take a journey to the very heart of the metal.
Okay, for this trip, let's imagine we can shrink down and become microscopic explorers. We're about to tour a city that was literally forged in fire, a tiny metropolis created in the split second a weld is made. And just like any city, it's got different neighborhoods, each with its own vibe, its own structure, and its own character.
And we're going to be your tour guides. We'll start on the outskirts, where the heat made some big changes, and then we're going to work our way right into that chaotic, molten hot downtown core. Let's start our tour just outside the main event.
So our first stop is a neighborhood that scientists have a name for, the heat-affected zone, or just the HAZ. This is the area right next to the weld. It got close enough to the action to get seriously transformed, but, and this is key, it never actually melted. You can think of it as the suburbs of our little weld city, and let me tell you, they've been through a major renovation.
So here's the deal. The intense heat comes in and just scrambles the metal's normally nice, organized crystal structure, and that can create weaker spots, more brittle arrangements. These changes are totally invisible from the outside, but they are absolutely critical. If you get this zone wrong, you've basically built a hidden weakness right into the foundation of your structure.
But here's where it gets really cool. Scientists are now acting like microscopic city planners for this zone. They've figured out that they can add these tiny, nano-sized particles that act like seeds for stronger crystals to grow, basically reinforcing the whole neighborhood. They're learning how to control the welding current not just for heat, but to perfectly engineer the final properties of these suburbs, renovating them on the fly for maximum strength. It's incredible.
All right, let's keep moving. We're leaving the suburbs and heading right into the heart of it all, the chaotic, fiery center of the weld, the fusion zone. This is the spot where the metal didn't just get hot, it completely melted down and was basically born again.
The fusion zone, or as some people call it, the weld's nugget, is ground zero. This is where the original metals, and usually some filler metal, all mix together in this molten soup before it cools down and becomes a totally new structure. The properties of this new downtown core pretty much decide how the entire weld is going to perform.
And man, the transformation here is just wow. The intense churning action can actually shrink the metal's crystal grains, which kind of weirdly makes the metal both stronger and more flexible at the same time. You can even create what's basically a composite material right inside the weld itself. By picking the exact right filler metal, scientists can cook up advanced materials, like these so-called high-entropy alloys, which are designed from the atom up for insane performance. Every little detail matters here, even how fast it cools. Okay, so we've seen the subrooms, we've seen the downtown core, now we're coming to the most critical, most challenging, and honestly the most fragile part of our entire journey, the border. We're talking about that microscopic line where two totally different metals are forced to join together.
And I am not exaggerating here. When you're trying to weld something like aluminum to copper or steel to aluminum, this tiny, tiny borderland is everything. This is where atoms from two different families have to mix, and if you're not careful, they can form these nasty, brittle compounds that act like tiny little fault lines just waiting to crack open.
Meet the culprits. They're called intermetallic compounds, or IMCs for short. And the reason they're so bad for business is that their atoms lock together in this super rigid, orderly way that has zero give. They just snap. The best way to think about it is like putting a super thin layer of glass between two strong pieces of metal. You can just imagine what happens when you put that under a bit of stress.
But this is where the science gets really, really elegant. So on the left, you've got the problem. That thick, flat, brittle layer of IMCs, it's a perfect highway for a crack to form. But on the right, you've got the solution. What if? What if you could break up that brittle wall and turn it into a thinner, interlocking, wavy boundary? This serrated interface acts kind of like a zipper, mechanically locking the two metals together and making the joint way, way stronger. But how on earth do you do that?
The solution is just wild, and it comes from a place you'd never expect. Sound.
Yeah, you heard me right. Sound. Researchers found that if they blast the weld with super high-frequency ultrasonic vibrations as it's forming, they can physically shatter that brittle layer of glass. The vibrations force that boundary to form into that stronger interlocking zipper shape. It's an amazing way of using a physical force to control chemistry at the atomic level.
So let's zoom back out from our microscopic tour for a second. We visited the transformed suburbs of the has, the remelted core of the fusion zone, and that supercritical border at the interface. Having this deep, granular understanding isn't just for textbooks. It's what lets us go from just sticking metals together to truly engineering them. So why does any of this matter? Because every single time you step into a car, get on a plane, or just look up at a skyscraper, you're putting your trust in the integrity of thousands and thousands of welds. This microscopic science is what makes all those things safe and reliable. By mastering this hidden world, we literally build a stronger, safer world for all of us.
So the big takeaway here is that a superior weld doesn't happen by accident. It's engineered with incredible precision. It really boils down to 3 levels of control. First, you choose the right ingredients, the filler metals that are going to create the strongest possible alloy in that downtown core. Second, you meticulously control the process, the heat, the speed, the pressure, sculpting each zone like a master city planner. And finally, you use advanced tools, like sound waves or heat treatments, to polish and refine that final structure to make sure it's as tough as it can possibly be.
And that really brings us to a final thought. We've gone from just melting metal together to meticulously designing these tiny, microscopic cities inside our materials. We are getting a level of control over matter that not too long ago was pure science fiction. It really makes you wonder, right? If we can engineer strength at this incredible atomic scale, what are the limits? What are we going to build next?